Welcome, everyone. We'll just give everyone a few more minutes and we'll get started. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone.
Hit caption language. It's checked. Save. Honey.
You should go look at Yvonne.
How's that?
Where's Paul?
You see Yvonne in the corner. The big gray.
It's going into your ears, and so I can't hear anything.
What?
I can't hear anything. It's going into your ears. I'm going to get on my own phone.
Whatever you're doing, are you leaving me?
No, I'm just going to get on my own phone.
Peters, you're going to have to.
Well, it looks to be high noon. And as we have a good contingent of folks who have arrived early / on time, thank you. We will go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Wednesday gatherings. My name is Kim Schultz, and I'm the manager of interreligious engagement here at CTS. We are very happy to see familiar and new faces here to celebrate the Distinguished Alumni Award being awarded this year to Reverend Paul Kittlaus. And we are very excited indeed to see folks here supporting that and to hear from him and some special guests as well as we move through this hour together. So thank you first for being here. I also want to wish an Eid Mubarak to those who are celebrating the end of this long journey of hopefully a very rewarding month. And so a couple just business notes. Most of you came in here muted, so if you can make sure your mute button stays on for the larger portion of our time together, and then there will be a time at the end where we will fet and celebrate Paul. So we will open up mics at that point, and then certainly if there's questions in the latter half, you can unmute yourself and ask any questions as the time becomes appropriate. I also want to just remind you that there is a chat, and if you see new and old faces, if you want to say hi, if you want to communicate your congratulations to Reverend Kittlaus, please use the chat, and we love that as an opportunity for folks to engage with each other. Also, any reflections you have as people are speaking or reactions, that's what the chat is there for, and this is the beauty of the world we live in right now. So without further ado, I want to pass it as we start all of our Wednesday gatherings with different voices in what we call words of gathering, which is a moment for us to center and hear from different and distinct and diverse voices that can share a reflection, a poem, a blessing, a reading, a thought from their particularity of faith. And so I am very honored to on Eid to welcome Shahrukh Ahmed, who is a student, and we are so happy to have you here to share the words of gathering. So I pass it to you.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Shahrukh Ahmed. I also go by Sherry because as an Egyptian, we have nicknames for everybody. And then when that gets old, we come up with another nickname. So it's not just for white people. I guess you could describe me as a Sunni Muslim whose adherence to any particular madhab or school of thought is really only for reducing confusion regarding personal worship. But regarding my actual worldview, I center the Quran and Sunnah, or sayings and doings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, through a consciously reflexive lens of the overall maxims or goals of Islam. So I would describe my worldview as being one of a fallible Muslim knowledge seeker. And also it's pretty distinctively American, if I'm being honest. You know how these Wednesday gatherings were established during the pandemic? Well, that reminds me of how Islam, much like other religions, encourages the visiting of the sick. I personally see this as going beyond physical illness. When someone has not been around, we should check up on them. And even before things reach that point, we should hold gatherings as a form of communal self-care. Islam inspires me, as introverted as I am, to visit my friends and be visited. And I'm pretty sure that if Zoom existed back then, that God would have encouraged Zoom gatherings in the Quran for those that cannot meet up in person. Ultimately, God reminds us time and time again in the Quran that we will someday be gathered with those that we love. Of course, one can interpret this to mean that the kind of company we keep ultimately affects us on a spiritual level, and I'm not denying this. Yet I also think that it also means that when we love each other and when we gather like this in this life, we can lead each other towards God. And in that way, the importance of gatherings in Islam makes so much sense to me. After all, one of God's 99 names in Islam is al-Jama', or the gatherer. Could also be seen as the unifier or the uniter. I believe that if we allow our love of God to lead us by whichever path to him speaks most to the soul that he placed inside of each of us, then God himself will facilitate gatherings like this as al-Jama'. And I'd like to, I believe that the continuance of the Wednesday gathering tradition is a testament to that. And I'd like to conclude now with a much loved throne verse of the Quran, which is said to not only sum up all of Islam in one verse, but can also help us to feel like God is pulling up a chair or a throne to our gathering today. So I'll read the Arabic and then I'll read the translation. And forgive me, my voice might be fried from reading the Quran throughout all of Ramadan. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. God, there is no deity save him, the ever-living, the self-subsistent fount of all being. Neither slumber overtakes him, nor sleep. His is all that is in the heavens and all that is on earth. Who is there that could intercede with him, unless it be by his leave? He knows all that lies open before men, and all that is hidden from them, whereas they cannot attain to aught of his knowledge, save that which he wills them to attain. His eternal power overspreads the heavens and the earth, and their upholding wearies him not. And he alone is truly exalted, tremendous. And
Thank
that's it.
Thank you, Sherry, for that wonderful reflection. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Hudler. I am the manager of donor engagement here at CTS in the advancement office, and I just want to give an explanation of the Distinguished Alumni Award. So we've been doing this for, I'm not sure how many years, probably a couple of decades, and this is where we select an alumni each year to be given a prestigious award that is a testament to their outstanding achievements and contributions to their ministry and community. And again, for this year's 2024 award, we have selected Rev. Paul Kittlaus, who graduated in 1959. He has maintained his support and connection with us throughout the years in financial support and participating in various community-wide events. This award reflects our respect and admiration for his outstanding achievements, specifically for his newest publication of Organizing Justice Church. I don't know if you could see it with the with the filter, but his recent publication for his book, as well as his presentation of abstracts and resistance, which is some of his art ministry that he's been doing. So Rev Kittlaus asked a good friend to speak on his behalf today, who I would like to introduce you all to. So this is Rev Dr. Yvonne Delk, who is the former executive director for the Community Renewal Society of Chicago. She was the first Black woman to be ordained in the United Church of Christ and has served the denomination in leadership positions, including serving as the director of the Office for Church and Society. For 60 years, she has served as an educator, preacher, organizer, and prophetic voice, leading the fight for human and civic rights for people of color, children, and the poor throughout 5 continents. She is the founding director of the Center for African American Theological Studies, and Dr. Delk's articles on the Black church experience, racism, and human rights have appeared in many publications. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Delk.
Thank you. I am more than honored to say a few words about Paul Kittlaus. It was my privilege to work with him during the 80s as he served as the director of the United Church of Christ Washington Office on Public Policy. And Paul exemplified the kind of leadership that was needed at a time that the stakes were very high. As I arrived to take my position as head of the Office of Church and Society, 1 million people were gathering in a march for peace on the streets of New York. Both Russia and the United States had the capacity to end life as we knew it, with their ability to wage a nuclear war. However, a nuclear holocaust was not the only threat. It was also the Reagan years, and President Reagan was moving to balance the budget on the backs of the poor. Over 1 million mothers and fathers would be ineligible for food stamps. Tens of thousands of children would lose Medicaid coverage, and hundreds of thousands of poor young students would no longer receive free or reduced price lunches. And Paul Kittlaus created an unbelievable response. He walked into my office with a campaign theme: the poor have suffered enough. The poor have suffered enough. I love the theme. However, he had more than a theme. He also had a moral strategy. He proposed to me that we take the lead in organizing a national interreligious campaign to deny and block President Ronald Reagan these budget cuts. Well, I was more than ready to join Paul. So we moved with moral authority and with the belief that we could convince partners of different denominations and different faiths, as well as partners from secular organizations, to join us in a faith-based movement for justice. And I was already impressed with Paul's ability to assemble a Washington staff. It wasn't based on sameness, but with differences in skill sets and perspectives. A UCC staff was in place in the Washington office that included the likes of Barry Lynn, gifted in civil rights and civil liberties, a Gretchen Ike, a pastor's wife with skills for public policy advocacy, Jay Littner, a pastor with theological skills, and Faith Evans, who had moved from being a member of a gang, serving time in prison, to becoming a member of the National Welfare Rights Organization, and now offered a perspective as a staff member from the ground up. Inspired by that theme and impressed by the staff, the poor have suffered enough, and very impressed with Paul's campaign strategy, we began the process of convincing all of our allies in the DC office, our allies in headquarters, our allies in the National Council of Churches, as well as our partners in the Welfare Rights Organization and other secular justice organizations, to set aside their normal schedules and assignments and focus entirely with us on this moral fight. But Paul came to me with a theme and a moral strategy, but he also had a plan with goals and strategies and timelines. This involved grassroots organizing. We had a field strategy, we had a media strategy, and a Hill strategy. And as we brought more than 800 people from the religious community to the congressional offices to make our voices and our witness known. As a result, President Reagan had asked for $22 billion in cuts to food stamps and aid to families with dependent children. And at the end of that budget process, Congress only granted $3 billion. Well, we didn't stop all the budget cuts. However, we reduced them by more than 80%, and I call that a success. This campaign also provided room and space for the United Church of Christ to move away from its historical position of a just war to a just peace. We acknowledge that God's will for a world of shalom is much broader vision than merely the absence of tension. It's the presence of justice. And as a result, I was pleased to present to the General Synod of the United Church of Christ meeting in Ames, Iowa in 1985, a pronouncement and a proposal for action calling on all of our churches to declare themselves as just peace churches. And the process for this vote began under Paul's watch. Well, my testimony is only one. There are many more. Paul Kittlaus has demonstrated over and over again that change is possible, that faith is believing in spite of the evidence and then watching the evidence just fade away. I wrote on the back of his book that was just held up, Organizing Justice Church, that to know Paul is to know a person of commitment, conviction, and courage. A person who's willing to live his life upfront and personal before the powers and principalities of injustice. What is the result? It is justice made visible in hearts, in the church, in the nation, and the world. Well, Paul, I continue in my 85th year of life to move with passion and commitment for justice. There's this African word, Ubuntu. It means I am because you are. And because you are, I can be also. Because of you, the movement for justice is alive. And interns and pastors and persons who've been touched by you continue to witness in so many places. I am so delighted that CTS is offering you this Distinguished Alumni Award. You are more than capable and more than worthy to receive this award. I am so grateful for the time that I've spent with you. And I am sure that the works that we have done continue to have an impact in the world that we live in today. Blessings to you.
Dr. Delk, it is good to be with you, and thank you for such a marvelous testimony. On other occasions, I have said this, and I think it is fitting to say it today. Dr. Ben Hooks, one of the great justice leaders of our time, once said, if you are a leader and no one is following you, you are just taking a walk. And unfortunately, friends, there are a lot of so-called leaders out there who are just walking. However, for nearly 170 years, Chicago Theological Seminary has been on the frontier, literally and figuratively, of partnering with and equipping authentic, audacious leaders who are committed to the increase of justice and mercy in the world. And we gathered today to honor one such leader. The Reverend Paul Kittlaus grew up in the Midwest, earned degrees from the University of Missouri, Chicago Theological Seminary, the University of Chicago, and George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He served churches in the ghetto and barrios and suburbs and even big downtown churches. He was drawn to the prophetic and social engagement ministries, including 10 years as a lobbyist for the United Church of Christ in Washington. In retirement in Claremont, he began abstract painting. His paintings are in the permanent collections of the Claremont Museum of Art, Claremont Heritage, and the Claremont United Church of Christ. CTS family, please join me today in honoring this year's recipient of CTS's annual Distinguished Alumni Award, Reverend Paul Kittlaus.
That's a bumper sticker from our campaign trying to get Ronald Reagan's cuts for the poor eliminated. I worked for Clergy and Laity Concerned just prior to putting this campaign together, and I learned from my friend and colleague Dick Fernandez that if you're going to make change, you have to have a 20-city strategy. You have to be able to make things happen the same day in 20 cities or more around the country. And that was a great gift to learn from Dick, how one puts together such a campaign. And Dick was very clear. You always had to have a button and a bumper sticker if you got a serious campaign. And I just showed you the bumper sticker. I'm deeply touched by this award. I would not have expected it. In fact, I think this may be the first time publicly, maybe even privately, that people have talked to me about being distinguished. A troublemaker is much more familiar to me as to how folks saw me. One of my missions in retirement is to find ways to increase the capacity of the church to do its justice ministry. And I want if there's any way in which one generation can speak to the next generation, I'd like to be able to convey to students who are listening at this moment. I so wish I were there, and I wish we would do this face to face, because I want to hear what you see and what you think needs to be done. But for me, it went something like this. I read in a magazine a section of a speech that was given in 1884 by the Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. And he was speaking to an audience of veterans of the Civil War. Some had volunteered to join the Army, and some had not. There was division and unhappiness, and people turned to this wise man. He said, I think, as life is action and passion, it is required that we should share the action and passion of our time at peril of being judged not to have lived. That mobilized something in me and made it clear that my work is to engage in the issues of my time. Now, there were many. I had a big choice, but I thought at that point, and I wrote them down, that the top three issues of my time were peace, poverty, and racism. So I'm a white, liberal, middle-class, right-handed man. And I was enjoying all the privileges that were given to persons with such a profile. Yet Oliver Wendell Holmes tells me that if I fail to engage in the issues of my time, peace, poverty, and racism, I would be judged by history that I failed to live. I read this in 1962. I was 27 years old, and I was a graduate of Chicago Theological Seminary. And I was ready. I felt ready to make the central focus of my ministry these three priorities: peace, poverty, and racism. Now, I was thinking, planning, churning over in my mind, how do I get a hold of these things? And there was a lot going on in the world around me. 1962, the first 10 years of my ministry, I was ordained in 1959, were the 60s. And some of us remember that because it's part of our experience, and many know it as part of history. What else was going on? Well, John Kennedy became president in 1961, the year before, and he immediately sent another 500 special forces troops and military advisors to assist the pro-Western government in South Vietnam. By the end of 1962, there were approximately 11,000 military advisors in South Vietnam. And by the end of the war, 1974, eventually cost the United States 58,000 lives of Americans and 350,000 casualties. And we find many of these casualties on the streets among the homeless in cities around the country. Of course, there were also somewhere between 1 and 2 million Vietnamese deaths. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave the original "I Have a Dream" speech in a visit to Rocky Mount, North Carolina. In 1962, Cesar Chavez, farm worker, formed the National Farm Workers Association, which later, after the labor union was recognized, became the United Farm Workers of America. And they called upon the churches to also engage in their struggle. 1962, Malcolm X held a press conference at the Los Angeles Statler Hilton Hotel to bring international attention to the deadly Los Angeles Police Department actions and gross mischaracterization of events in the press by LAPD Chief William Parker. 1962, there were small movements gained in women's liberation alongside the other movements were forming as people began to become clearer about their own self-interest, about how they were trapped in a place they didn't want to be, and they wanted to find ways together to burst out. The popular culture in 1962 still glorified the image of a happy homemaker. I met a lot at that time in a church I was serving in Van Nuys who were ready and so eager to become more than a happy housewife. 1963, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, a founding text of modern feminism that is considered one of the most influential books of the 20th century. On an evening on Sunday, September 30th, 1962, Southern segregationists rioted and fought state and federal forces on the campus of the University of Mississippi. They were trying to prevent the enrollment of the first Black African-American student to attend the university. His name was James Meredith. And yesterday, I went online to the University of Mississippi and looked at a picture of their football team. Lots happened since 1962. And then there were the assassinations in the 60s. I think someone who was not there would find it hard to imagine the sense of devastation that we all felt in the deep places of our lives when in November 1963, John F. Kennedy, president, was assassinated. 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated. In 1968, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And later that year, June 1968, Robert Kennedy, candidate for president, was assassinated. I began in the midst of all of this to do a talent hunt to identify and recruit a team of clergy who were ready to join me in this commitment. And I began to search for ministry opportunities where I could do this work. It soon followed that in 1965, with my family, wife, and 3 elementary age children, I moved into Pacoima. We moved into Pacoima in Los Angeles, an area of deep poverty. I hoped we could immerse ourselves in the schools and streets of Pacoima, where we would experience ourselves as outsiders, that we could see what it means to have a dominant culture and a subculture that is struggling to be itself. Our little church in Pacoima organized 2 projects during that time, both very much requested from our interviews. In fact, the people that I started working with in Pacoima in that little church were all white people who refused to flee as the neighborhood changed. White flight was not what it did happen to some of the people, but not what this core group was doing. But they needed, I said, we got to find out we got to reach out into the community and find out in the lives of people around us, what is in fact the things that they're concerned about. And we need to see if there's a way that our church could organize a response. And we finally decided that we needed to help those families whose children primarily spoke Spanish at home, or those children where there was no academic stimulation, to prepare them for kindergarten. It was way before the Head Start program, and we became a Head Start training site as soon as President Johnson got that underway. And we organized a kind of an early form of youth gang intervention to bring gang leaders together and to sit and talk and find out what our mutual concerns were and our hopes. And as we went around the circle one night long after I'd begun walking the streets to get to know the young people, I said, what do you want to learn? There is conversation going on with the anti-poverty program in Washington. One of their lawyers has been out to see what we're doing. And we could apply for a grant, and we could create a school, and we can create that school where you hire whoever you want to hire to teach you whatever you want to learn. Now, that's a big risk, isn't it? I kept thinking about, well, if I like to crack safes, I would hire somebody who was really good at it, and that would be my education. When I asked them what they wanted, they said, one of them, I'd like to know how to fill out an application form for a job. I've never done that. I'd like to know how to do an interview. I've never had an interview. I don't know how to present myself in such a way that somebody might hire me. It was fun to work with some of those white folks in the church who said, well, I don't know anybody in the community. How am I going to learn what they want? So I gave them, the men, the names of 2 barbershops, one primarily Chicano, one primarily African-American. I said, the next 2 times you need a haircut, go either to Joe's or Jose's. And I said to the ladies in the group, here are some hairdressers in the community. The next time you're ready, go get your hair done in these places. And I gave them the names of a couple of laundromats. I said, next time you're going to do your laundry, take it either to this one or to that one. And it was really hard for many of the people to do. One guy told me he had his hand on the front door handle going to get a haircut, and he just couldn't get, summon the courage to actually pull the door open and go do that. But eventually, all of these things created so much freedom, so much information, so much eagerness to put some things together to address the issues that were told to us. I eventually went to work for an urban training center in Los Angeles called Commit, worked with my friend Speed Lease. We trained clergy skills in community organizing, planned social change, and conflict management. Then for 10 years, 1964 to 1974, I served as director of the Washington office in Washington, D.C. Now that was fun. You could really make a difference in people's lives if you were successful. Just if you were sitting in a committee meeting where the federal budget was being put together, the question was how many dollars should be spent on food stamps at that time. If you just add 1 0 at the end of the line, you could serve 100,000 more children school breakfasts. So we learned how to find ourselves in those places, in those conversations, to communicate with people. And then I had a lot of fun. When Jimmy Carter was president, he had one of his staff reach out to me because I was a UCC pastor, and this person high up in the White House structure was a UCC person, and therefore, if they wanted a trusted religious voice, they could reach out, and I would do it, or I'd get somebody who knew the issue they wanted to talk about. But I have to tell you, it really messes up your ego when you take the elevator down out of the Methodist building across the street from the Supreme Court, hail a taxi, and then tell the guy, I want to go to the White House East Gate, please. I mean, it's hard not to believe you're really something when you can follow that line. I did have meetings at the White House for almost 6 months working on inflation, hospital cost containment issues. And the church at that point, and that's when we did the campaign that Yvonne talked about. By the way, Yvonne asked me to speak at her installation representing the staff. So I used as a scripture, Jesus went into the wilderness taking nothing but his staff. Wonderful way to start a ministry. I worked full-time as a staff person for interfaith anti-war organization, clergy and laity concerned about Vietnam. Learned from our friend Dick Fernandez. Phone call. I learned from our friend Dick Fernandez how to think about 20 city strategies for whatever you're going to do. And then when I finished with that work, the war was winding down. I went to 2 larger congregations, one in Santa Barbara and one in Madison. I want to throw in a story from Santa Barbara in terms of just pastoral presence in people's lives. A stranger walked in church one day, sat in the back pew. When church was over, he came and waited kind of to the end of the line and got up to me and he said, I'm new, I'd like to talk with you. So we made a date. He had a house over in Montecito, and I went over the next week and sat down, and he told me his story. And he told in such a way I felt like he was talking to me as a conduit to God. It was just such a full, beautiful confession. My job was to sit there and listen and receive it and to love him in the process. He said he'd been a head of a big, he was a financial coordinator of a big corporation. He had a big house, family of 2 daughters, a wife, and they had a rich social life in the community. And he had decided that he was gay. privately, and he struggled with what should he do. He really got to the point where he wanted to start a new life, start it over again, start in a way that was more authentic to who he was. So his plan was to set up a foundation that would support his two daughters in their endeavors, that would support his wife so she could continue in the social level that she was involved with, and disappear. He went into the boss's office early in the morning and put the letter of resignation down, and then he went to O'Hare Airport and he flew away. Just hadn't told anybody that this was about to happen. Well, I know what happened. He flew to Los Angeles, came up to Montecito, bought a house, and then reached out to the UCC church, which was the denomination he was in the suburb of Chicago. And I said, well, how is it going with your family? He said, well, I invited finally my two daughters to come. I needed to tell them. And they came, and it happened about a year after he had departed. And he said to them, I'm gay, and that is the reason that I left. And there was this silence, he said, and one of his daughters jumped up and ran across and kneeled down and hugged him. And she said, oh, Dad, that's such good news. I thought you had cancer. Those opportunities are powerful. And to be present at that release that was going on in him was a very powerful thing. So I'd say, now I want to come to a close, that I feel like I was engaged in the issues of my time, and I'm happy to report that I solved them all, so you don't have to work on this anymore. Wrong. They were actually given to my generation by the previous generation as unfinished business, and I'm giving them to you as unfinished business because we did all we could think of, all we could generate support for, but still they are issues of your time. And so I want to challenge you to take that Oliver Wendell Holmes quote and figure out, of all the issues that are going on in your time, which are the ones you want to commit your ministry and your life to. Narrow it down. You can't do all of them. You've got to become an expert and really focus on one. Find the organizations that are already at work and become part of that process. And then come back to the church and increase the church's capacity to engage in those issues. I wrote, then you do the talent hunt. After you figure the issues, you go find for the colleagues in ministry and lay leaders who want to join you in whatever the work is you're going to do on whatever the issue is you're going to do. Those are the first steps toward building a ministry to build a justice church. I've written this full story of my work with a focus on the justice ministry work. And it was published last September, and I hope that it helps you see more possibilities for your life and for ways of getting focused and on the way. So I want to end up referring to these two paintings behind me. They are the most recent paintings that I've done. One's called Picket Signs. The other is called Golden Blue. I heard a sermon by Mike Kinman at the Episcopal Church in Pasadena, in which the Grace Episcopal, in which the title was Tyrants Hate Poets. Now, tyrants try to capture us in fear and spell out all kinds of terrible things that only they, as the strong man, can help us solve or can solve it themselves, and we need to give our support. But poets, other creative people, other artists in other fields have to kind of stand outside that fear and keep thinking, keep creating, keep listening to the future, keep expressing themselves in their various art forms. I can say that when I was working on for 4 years on my painting, I never thought of Donald Trump once while I was painting. In between painting, yes. I also wanted to say that Bertolt Brecht said, I believe that art is not a mirror to reflect reality, it is a hammer to shape it. I'd sure like to get to the point where I had a great hammer that I could shape reality with my paintings. That's where I'm trying to go. And am I successful as a painter? I think of Will Rogers. He said, all you need is naivete and enthusiasm, and success is sure to follow. That's my life as a painter. Thank you.
Congratulations, Reverend Kittlaus. Thank you for those words. And if you want to hold up the award, maybe we can all turn off our mics and give you proper acknowledgement. So I encourage you to turn off your mics and we can have a whole bunch of hooting and hollering for the Distinguished Alumni Award 2024.
Woohoo!
Hey, congratulations.
Yay! Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you so much for those words, Paul, and giving us so much to think about, and the power of art as well. I just wanted to open it up if there are questions or comments from the group, memories, reflections. We have a few moments left, and if anybody wanted to ask anything or respond in any way, we wanted to give space for that here. You can either put it in the chat or you can turn off your mic and speak up.
Hi. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Thomas. And Paul, it's wonderful to be part of this celebration for you. And you and Janet and I have been good friends for a long time, since your time in Washington. And as you were recounting some of the things that were accomplished and that you were involved in, I was struck by how in the days when we were all working there, we'd work really, really hard on an issue and lobby as hard as we could, get grassroots stirred up and do everything we could. At the end of the day, if we only got half of what we wanted, we cheered. We celebrated and we said, we'll go back tomorrow and work on the rest of it. And that seems so different now. And I wonder if you have some thoughts about what lobbying was like then versus where we are today, where if you don't get it all, you're not happy.
Elizabeth and her husband threw the best Kentucky Derby parties I've ever been to. Great mint juleps. There was a popular saying when I was in Washington. I don't know if people use it now, but it is that we're called to be faithful, not successful. Now, my response to that is to say, baloney. We're called to be, if we're trying to put food on the table of children, if we fail to do that, or if we only get half of it, I can't find myself feeling happy about that, because there's the other half that aren't going to get the food. So there's a consequence to our failure at that time. So that's always how I've responded to that notion about what if you weren't successful. you got to be a better organizer. You got to really. I mean, Cesar Chavez was the most persistent organizer I've ever seen. He would not let anybody get by with less than the absolute exhausting work that he asked them to do. I like that way of approaching it. Sorry, I'm not going to let you off the hook with only half of it, Elizabeth.
Are there other reactions, questions, thoughts you wanted to share with Reverend Kittlaus? There's some notes in the chat as well, Paul, if you're seeing those. Well, hearing none, I think oh, is there somebody who wants to say something? Nope.
This is Sister Kay, Paul's sister and brother-in-law. Congratulations, Paul. From the view from behind, parenting was a delight when I came along because you bamboozled your parents, and on the way, they were very, very proud. We are proud. We're anxious to see you both again, you and Tammet.
Thanks, Kay.
Paul,
Go ahead, Richard.
Paul, I'm curious to know, what is the one story that you left out of your book?
Let's see. I think it has to do with you and
No,
Jack Daniels or something like that.
Why don't you share with them? Why don't you share with the group how you and I tried to turn Billy Graham into I'm sorry, our friend Bill Coffin.
Oh, yeah. William Sloane Coffin, who people my age would know and appreciate, and I hope others might look up his history. He's gone now. But I accompanied Bill around Southern California and had done the advance work to set up churches where he could speak. And he was on television and he did a radio program. He was just back from Vietnam and had a lot to share with us. And riding in the car with him, I suddenly had the idea that he has the magnetism, he has the preaching presence, he has the power, and he has the so clever a mind that he could play Billy Graham, only on the other side of the political spectrum. So I started thinking about, well, how could we put together a campaign, an organization? So I got in touch with the Billy Graham organization and looked at their organization chart. Hi, Eloise. And I tried to fashion something, and I said, the first thing I have to do with this is to send it to Dick Fernandez, and if he thinks this is an interesting idea, why, then we have to go see Bill Coffin. So eventually I flew back east, and Dick picked me up at the airport, and we went to Coffin's house, spent half a day putting this idea to him. It was a bigger idea than he had to deal with in a while. And he got interested, and he got, I think, backed off, and he got interested. And finally, he went to talk to some other of his friends, and they all told him it's all about your ego. You shouldn't get yourself involved in that. And it's a major disappointment. I could see Dick and I going into Chicago and spending 6 months organizing the local churches, the church choirs, the youth groups, and then Coffin would come in and do 5 or 6 rallies. And we spent a lot of time talking about the altar call. What, at the end of the sermon, when Billy Graham invites people to come forward, those who've given their hearts to Jesus. What does a liberal do? Well, we never quite found the answer to that question. Interesting. Let me know if you've got an idea.
We get them to sign up for engagement.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the engagement. Thank you, Reverend Kittlaus. President Braxton, did you want to just say a couple words? I see now you are spotlighted, so perhaps you want to just close. We have a couple community announcements, but maybe you want to just say a few words here to close us out.
Indeed. Thank you, Kim. Reverend Kittlaus, if you were to see my business card, you would know that my official title is President and Professor of Public Theology here at CTS. However, I have adopted what my actual title is, and that is Chief Listening Officer. And I want you to know, on behalf of your CTS family, that we have heard with our third ear today. And thank you for not letting us off the hook. Our minds are filled with wisdom because of you, your ministry, and what you have shared with us today. Our hearts are filled with joy, and in the spirit of wisdom and joy, we are going forth on the pilgrimage to be better people and to make this world a better place. Thank you for your ministry, and we are going forth today in peace and in the spirit of godly power. You are loved and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Braxton. And thank you everyone for joining us. Real quick, we hope that you will join us in 2 weeks for our 100 Years of Educational Excellence, where we're celebrating 4 extremely distinguished alumni here at CTS, whose together their tenure equals 100 years of teaching. So we will be doing a hybrid event at CTS. You can join us just like this on the Zoom link or in person, where we'll be having lunch, and rumor has it an ice cream bar. I'm really pushing the ice cream bar. And we hope that you will join us there. Are there other community announcements for the good of all that we would like to share here? Well, hearing none, thank you again, Reverend Delk, for joining us, and Reverend Kittlaus, congratulations, and thank you for everyone who joined us here today and made this possible. So have a great rest of your day.